Hello, everyone out there in radio, internet land, however you're watching this. So we're joined by a very special guest right now. I've actually been kind of looking forward to this interview for a minute now. And it's one of the maybe I guess I would classify it as one of the better surprises, goodies that came out of November's election. We have a new county treasurer, Thomas Whitener, is going to be taking on that role as formerly, Mary Bulkema. Thomas, thank you for taking time out of what I'm sure is a very busy schedule to come on our program. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing very well, and thank you for that very kind introduction. Um, it yeah, it has been incredibly busy. I've had about 2 weeks on the job, and it feels a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, or more like several of them pointed directly at your head.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's going well, and I'm very excited to be able to serve people of Kalamazoo County.
Well, it's great to see you up there, and backtrack a little bit. So we cover this a little bit post-election episode, but here in the at the county level, we kind of experienced our own version of the red mirage. Election night, everything was looking for a minute there. It looked like we were going to have one of the more conservative outcomes in decades, but everything basically shifted the other way. Once start getting votes in, and your victory is pretty unique too, because I would say you're definitely underdog going into it. For those who don't know, like a lot of even Mary Balkema as a Republican county treasurer has been for many years, and
Uh,
touted a lot
13
of
years, yeah.
touted a lot of endorsements from like local Kalamazoo area Democrats. Um, so I just wanted to kind of start off by asking, just your general reaction when you found out you won. Again, kind of coming in as this underdog. What did it feel like? I guess it wasn't even election night; it was a couple of days later when you found out. But what was your reaction finding that you had won this seat? That, to be frank, a lot of people had dismissed as a possibility.
I so so my wife and I are both data people, and so we spent the time from the moments polls closed and results started coming in to the time we found out that Kalamazoo City and the absentee ballots in Kalamazoo City had carried me across the line. Um, Sitting there with spreadsheets and the county clerk's website open, crunching numbers and saying, okay, if we get a vote percentage of this much from this place and do this thing and this thing happens, then I'll win. And I got to say, leading up to those last moments, it was increasingly more and more of a long shot. And then all of a sudden, Kalamazoo City came riding over the hill like the cavalry. And those boats came in, and there were a few minutes of just completely stunned silence where we sat looking at each other and went, oh my goodness, we actually just did this thing. And then, immediate rejoicing and a nice bottle of bourbon was opened, I'll say. And Yeah, from that moment on, it was okay. Uh, we, chased this down, wrestled it to the ground, and now I've got to figure out how to do the absolute best job that I possibly can. Because an election is nothing more than the world's worst job interview. And once you win one, that's great, but now you have the responsibility of taking this position, this power that has been entrusted to you, and making sure that you are uh, well, look, it's MLK Day, so making sure that you are doing your part to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. um, and that's a big responsibility, and I take it very seriously. And so from the first moment that we realized well, after we celebrated a little bit, I'll admit, it was okay. Now we get to work. Now we figure out how to do this thing and how to do it right. So that was that.
Well, great. It was a really great thing for us as well. Just as far as just like organizers and all that. I'll go a little bit in the issues around that in a moment, but first, real basic question. I like to ask these, before we get to the really juicy stuff.
Oh yeah.
I feel a lot of times these kind of county level, statewide elections, sometimes people aren't even so sure or clear on what these positions mean. So could you just like briefly describe, or not so briefly, describe to the listeners at home, what are your responsibilities as Kalamazoo County Treasurer, and basically what are you in charge of? What are your powers? But really, just what kind of responsibilities are entailed in that position?
I am super happy to do that. Could we pause recording for just 1 second?
All right, we're back. So again, just talking about some of the responsibilities that you have now that you are the new Kalamazoo County Treasurer.
Okay, well, first and foremost, county treasurer is responsible for the collection of delinquent taxes. Um, and that's a distinction I think that is missed a lot of times. County treasurer doesn't actually collect your property taxes. That's handled by your city treasurer, your township treasurer, your village treasurer. But from the time that those are a year due, they become delinquent, and the city basically sends a bill to me, the county treasurer, and the county treasurer takes money from the county's fund and pays all of those delinquent taxes. So all of them are paid and all of the local units are made whole. But what we've essentially done at that point is bought the debt. So we now own that debt on property taxes, and our job is to collect it. By state statute, that first year, those property taxes are delinquent, and then the next year, they are in what we call forfeiture, which means that the person who owes those taxes, or more accurately, the property itself, which owes those taxes because taxes follow the property, um, are in the process of forfeiting their interest to the property. At any time in that year, anyone actually can pay the taxes and that property becomes redeemed. It is actually called redemption, which is a little big of a word for me, but it works. And then everything's fine and good and we move on. If they are not redeemed at the start of or on the third anniversary of those taxes being due, so this year it's 2018 taxes we're looking at, on March 31st, which is the last day to pay forfeit taxes that are in forfeiture, on April 1st, the taxes go into foreclosure. And that is the legal process of the ownership, the interest in those properties being ceded to the governmental foreclosing unit, which is a complicated way of saying me, the county treasurer. It is a process that is necessary for the way our property system works. We try to use it as little as possible for anything anyone actually has interest in. And the reason is the job of the county treasurer is to collect the delinquent tax. It's not to foreclose on properties. We're tax collectors, we're not foreclosers. And so if someone passes away and they have no heirs, that property is going to sit fallow and completely unused unless it returns to me, and then I can turn around and I can sell it into the economy again, usually for not very much, which is why the auctions are a great place if you're looking to pick something up for development purposes and to put it to a higher and better use. But in situations where someone has an interest in that property, the county treasurer has a lot of leeway to work with someone to redeem their property. So I cannot forgive taxes. I legally can't, make the property taxes go away. A lot of people ask if I can, with a stroke of a pen, make the interest and fees go away or make the taxes go away, and I can't. Those are set down in state law, and that is outside the scope of what I can do. But the county treasurer can issue a 1-year withholding, exemption from foreclosure. So, we have people with outstanding 2017 taxes. There aren't very many, but there are some with outstanding 2016 taxes because they are making payments. They're catching up. They're working hard. They're our members of the community. They live in the property, and so we want that to continue. We want to keep people in their homes, and so it's in the interest of the community, and so we make sure that that happens. We set up payment plans, and I say we because a lot of people in my office do these things. End of the day, buck stops with me. So any blame, any I guess credit, but I give the credit to the people that work in my office. They're brilliant. But end of the day, it's me that's responsible. But we all work really hard to make sure people are stay in their homes. That's the housing side of things, and that's where my particular interest in what I'm focused on right now, because we're coming up on those deadlines, and I want to make sure that every single homeowner that can, that will reach out to me, that I can talk to, that I can possibly help, that we can do that. So that's what I'm focused on. The treasurer is also responsible for all of the funds that the county has to invest, and keeping those earning interest in ways that are compliant with Public Act 20, which is the state of Michigan law that dictates how governmental units can invest funds. So I can't go and invest in a multi-level marketing scheme, right? That doesn't conform to Public Act 20 and also is a terrible idea. Don't do that, people. I'm not a financial advisor, but please don't do that. I can't go and just willy-nilly invest in Chinese construction projects. I can't, anything that doesn't have a brick and mortar front in Michigan is, sometimes they're okay, but most of the time they're right out. And Public Act 20 is not complicated, but the implications of it are. And so it's very important that we pay attention to that. That's the investment banker side of the Treasurer's Department. We also handle the collection of dog licenses and the licensing of all of the puppers in Kalamazoo County. That's me. So license your dogs. It's the law. It's good for them. And if they're licensed, we can usually help them get back to you if they get lost, which is something that we're really excited to be able to do. We also move money around a lot. The county pays for a lot of things. It pays a lot of people. We employ quite a few people, and so whenever we have to make payroll, I don't make payroll and sign the checks for anybody outside of my office, but we make sure that the county stays funded and that money is moved around properly. We also are the primary accounting unit. We have the finance department of the county, and they handle a huge number of things, but the treasurer's office is sort of another check and balance to make sure that nobody's stealing from the county, nobody's wasting money. So fraud, waste, and abuse is something that we are very vigilant for and take care of. County treasurer is also the chair of the board of the land bank. So the land bank was created in 2009, I believe. And when the treasurer acquires properties like we did in bulk in 2007, 2008, 2009, and so on through the Great Recession, those properties need to be put back into the tax base. And at that time, it was just too much. There are too many properties. We don't have the staff. We didn't have the income because tax revenues just nosedived. So the land banks were created to create another avenue for putting those properties back into the tax base and putting them back into the community's hands so that they could be used to further and better the community. That was the original intention of it. It has been very successful in many of its endeavors and less successful in some others. But I'm excited to get to work with the land bank there. The county treasurer, as far as their duties that are laid out, that largely encompasses them, although there are some other fringe effects that they take part in. We sign off on real estate transactions for tax purposes and to make sure that all of that is flowing properly. The county treasurer is also on the reapportionment committee. So every 10 years we have a census, and everybody in Michigan should be familiar with the fact that we amazingly and fantastically passed the Independent Citizens Redistricting Committee. I was a big proponent of that when I was running for office in 2018, and I'm so happy that we got it out there, and I'm really excited to see the work they do on the state level. On the county level, it is still controlled by elected officials. And those elected officials are the county treasurer, the county clerk, the county prosecutor, and the other two people that are involved in this in it are the heads of the Democratic Party and the GOP. So the local branches of that party. So this year, that is going to be a little bit different than it has been in the past, because we have Meredith Place, county clerk, Democrat, Jeff Getting, Democrat, county prosecutor, and myself, Democrat, county treasurer. So, we have a majority on that. So we're going to work really hard to make sure that the districts are fair and that they are representative of the community. And that is something that I am looking forward to. I'm a systems designer by training. Just a little bit about me. I was a software developer for 10 years, and following that, I was a realtor helping people buy homes. My training is in mathematics and systems design, and trying to make systems fair. I was a balance designer. So literally, is this system fair? No? Great, it's broken, so let's fix it. And that's what I've been doing with my entire life. So I'm excited to apply that training to the treasurer's office.
Well, thank you, Thomas. That was super informative. That actually segues pretty well into our next question. Again, mentioned we're recording this on Martin Luther King Day. So this next one it relates to kind of the systemic racism questions involved with your position. And just a quick preface. I'm not going to go too deep into this. If you followed our show for any length of time, we've reported on various issues, with the previous treasurer, issues of potential racial bias that have been reported by, Kalamazoo Gazette, various other, outlets. So it is really critical. This is, a big question on people's minds now that we have like a new treasurer in your position. How are you going to bring your position to bear on issues of systemic racism and inequality at the county level? As the Kalamazoo treasurer, just kind of keeping in mind some of those past issues that have raised concerns for folks.
So I will say I have been on the job for a total of 10 days. And as you could tell from my answer to the previous question, there is a lot to learn and a lot of process and a lot of paperwork and there's a lot to understand. I knew there was going to be a lot. I did not quite imagine that it could possibly be this much. That being said, I'm working really hard. Obviously, cis het white guy. And so my experiences are not reflective of a large portion of our community's experiences. So one of the things that I am trying to do, and I always try to do, but especially now that I'm serving the citizens of Kalamazoo County, is to fill the voices that I have giving me advice, or that I bounce information off of, or ideas, trying to fill the spaces around me with a diverse group of people. My first hire, Cynthia Gill, is a Black woman, and having her voice is going to be invaluable, I know. And I'm very keen to fill the vacant positions in my office with a diverse cast of talented people, so that my views and the things that have been baked into me just by society, by growing up, who I am and where I've grown up, those aren't the only things informing my decisions. The other thing that I'm doing as much as possible is listening to the community. I want to do things like this, and I want to do things where we go out into the community and get information on things that have been issues in the past that maybe people haven't spoken up about, because like you said, I was an underdog, and everybody who ran against Mary Balcom was an underdog because she was a very popular treasurer. And so I want to make sure that I'm hearing from everyone, not just the people that look like me, not just the people who have traditionally been in power. We need to talk to everyone, we need to listen to everyone, and we need to make decisions based on the information that we gather there. It's a big job. There is a lot of different, very diverse populations and a lot of different situations across this county. The experience of someone in the core neighborhoods in Kalamazoo City is very different from someone who lives out in Washtenaw, or lives down in Plainwell. It's Plainwell. No, that's not the word I meant to say. Schoolcraft. Wow. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a
um,
lot of satellite towns.
it's a lot, and we need to understand the needs of those places and what they need help with. Because the county treasurer, while it has a very circumscribed, very specific set of powers and capabilities, has its fingers in every pie imaginable. And so knowing people, talking to people, working to get resources allocated to the places that they need to be, that's something that I can help with, and that's something that I'm excited to help with. Racial bias stems from a societal teaching that is broken in the first place, and from a lack of understanding. Whether that understanding is through an unwillingness to listen or understand, or just a lack of exposure. Um, I know I have a lack of experience just because I'm a white guy. And so I have to be willing to do the work to understand and to educate myself, so that I can do the things that are the best for the people in the county, in all of the different places and in all of the different situations that they're in.
All right, thank you, Thomas. And I think people will be glad to hear taking in these different perspectives. So the next couple of questions are actually about the land bank, and I want to preface real quick, just a little explainer for folks listening at home. It's something that comes up time and time again, especially if we talk to a lot of Kalamazoo organizers or just organizers in general. Especially in the context of the Kalamazoo County Land Bank. I'd say, the two big criticisms that always came up about your predecessor were, the racial bias thing, but also the way that the land bank was used. A lot of concerns about it being kind of used to, generate profits, potential uses like a gentrification tool. I will say, kind of near the end of their tenure, they got a little more even-handed about it. Again, it, Hood strategist says because of public pressure, um, but but
County treasurer over here, Charlie, to interject and interrupt, but
yeah,
public pressure is a very powerful thing and is a thing that should be used, because the public pressure is the only way we know what the public wants. And the only way we can serve the public properly is if we know what they want. So yes, public pressure, absolutely. Bring it. Pressure me. Tell me what you want. Let's do it.
but to just go on, the land bank, yes, yeah, that's what I like to hear too. Things around land banks, when I ran for city commission in 2019, one of my proposals and a couple other socialists around here proposed something similar, is like creating like a citizens land bank. There's been a very big discussion in Kalamazoo organizing circles about some way of like creating like a more democratic or people's land bank. So that's going to be kind of the thrust of this first land bank question is, do you support just in general ideas around like democratizing the county land bank? If so, like what kind of concrete community input and processes would you like to put into place to see a land bank that's more kind of community controlled rather than kind of just dispensed from one point of authority?
So, so that is a very complicated question. As I'm sure you're well aware, like the mechanisms of the land bank and of that whole gigantic system are not simple to change or turn or anything. It's a big ship, but it's also a very small operation. And the land bank sounds like a gigantic thing, but it's actually like 3 people, and then the board, which I get to be the chair of just by virtue of being the county treasurer. I also, again, I'm learning the land bank, but we haven't even had our first meeting where I've been board chair. So I've gotten to meet everyone and to learn a little bit about the work they're doing and that they've done. One of the things that I'm excited about is that the director of the land bank has been pushing very hard for a greater community involvement in the decisions about the projects the land bank undertakes and what exactly they do with those projects. And in addition, has pushed for a greater role for equity in the value structure of the land bank. Equity, not just to the point of inclusion, which they have been doing for the last year or so, but to the end of including people of diverse backgrounds, experiences, and understandings into leadership roles within the land banks, so that we can move forward with representative voices making decisions about real estate purchases and sales, property development, and bidding out projects, all of those sort of things. One of the things I'm really excited about that the land bank has been doing, and I want to continue and expand, is a democratization of the process. I was talking with Kelly Clark, the executive director of the land bank, about this just the other day. They have had a number of sessions where they sat down with people in the community, the specific geography where they're looking to do a project, to talk about specifically what project needs to be done. what the community needs, how it should be done, how it should look, how the process and the zoning and everything about it should be handled, such that the community is involved and has that buy-in, and then focusing on that project to the exclusion of others so that it gets done. And for the land bank, that's important, because if you have all these listening sessions and say, yeah, we listened to the community and they told us all these things, and then you go off and do whatever you want to do, or just forget about it and don't do anything, that buy-in is gone. Trust takes a lifetime to build and a moment to throw away. So the fact that they have now, on 2 separate projects and coming up on a third, done these listening sessions, worked with the community for design, for use, for structure, and then followed through on those projects, seen them to completion, and now we're putting them back in the hands of the community, I think that is a great way to go about it. Like you said, that's happened in the last couple of years, and I think that that needs to be the standard process going forward. As far as ideas about democratizing the land bank and moving it into more of a citizen-controlled board, the idea sounds good. And I would be open to discussing it and listening more about it. I worry that first off, that the charter that created the land bank would not allow for that, and we would have to destroy the land, dissolve the land bank and then reform something else, and something might fall through the cracks in that process. And I don't want to do that, because, when we're talking about software development and something falls through the cracks, you ship with a bug, you patch it later, it's fine. When we're talking about people's homes and their communities and their neighborhoods and their businesses, and something falls through the cracks, somebody gets hurt. There is, real tangible harm. And so while I like the idea of that, and I'm always for democratizing things, I worry that that process could get messy, and messy in this case is bad. But again, I'm not unwilling to do the study to learn about that, and really, work with you and other community organizers to see about getting to that point. But I don't know enough about it to say yes or no at this moment.
Well, I will say, just speaking as an organizer, it's very nice that you're actually open, receptive to that, and asking those questions. And for future reference, there are definitely there are people in this community smarter than me who've thought about the land bank question a whole lot. I'd definitely love to get you in touch with them.
Yeah, happy to get in touch with them. And I love being in rooms where I'm not the smartest guy in the room. It happens a lot, but that means that I have the opportunity to learn something, and I'm never happier than when I'm learning something.
All right. Our next question relates to, and again, these next couple questions, they're kind of rooted somewhat in the use of the land bank, but please feel free, to expand on it, in whatever way you think you could tackle these issues from your purview as county treasurer. But it relates to, Kalamazoo County. We still have, really tremendous houselessness problem. People really highlighted the camps around town have really shot up this year. How would as county treasurer, what do you have at your disposal? How would you address the houselessness issue here in Kalamazoo County?
So there are a couple of projects that are going on right now that are aiming to address that. One through developer in Kalamazoo City is handling that with the old Knights Inn, which is a temporary solution. Temporary solutions are necessary, but I'm kind of a permanent solutions guy. And so, the big issue, and coming from my realtor background, has made this clear, is just the lack of housing stock. It's too expensive to build anything right now. A certain orange politician had a tiff with Canada that drove up the price of wood, and a tiff with China that drove up the price of aluminum, and a tiff with everybody who supplies us with everything you need to build new houses. And so you cannot affordably build affordable housing at all right now. That's an issue. Uh, there's space there for federal funds to step in, and hopefully we can make that happen at some point in the near term future. But the land bank does have a couple of projects that are on the horizon that are building mixed income and affordable housing units. And I specifically call out the mixed income because studies have shown that if you have housing blocks that are all affordable housing, low income housing, whatever you want to call it. I like the term affordable housing, but it's been called many things in the past. That it creates these dense blocks of poverty that build these reinforcing cycles of poverty. And we see that in a lot of large cities. We see that in a lot of smaller cities as well that have taken up these large affordable housing projects. And it lends to not solving the problem in the long term, because you're just creating a concentration of inequality. Creating a mixed income areas where you have higher income and lower income units in the same building or in the same area creates a holistic system that lifts everyone up, raises the quality of life for everyone in that geography. And so we've got a project or two going on. Well, it's two parts of one bigger project going on at the land bank, where we are focusing on making sure affordable housing exists. There is a lot of things that have nothing to do with the county treasurer, that have more to do with policing and inequalities there, that we could, that if I didn't have my treasurer hat on, that you and I could probably sit down over a beer and have a long, very interesting conversation about. But that has nothing to do with anything that I can make a decision about. I'm working really hard right now on foreclosure abatement. So people who are in houses, I want to keep them in their houses, as well as providing them with the resources they need to make sure that those houses are healthy, safe places to live, that are good for their kids, that provide educational opportunities, that don't have walls that are filled with asbestos or covered in lead. Those resources exist in the community, and getting those resources into the hands of the people that need them is something I can do, because I have to be talking to these people anyway in order to prevent their foreclosures. And so I'm happy to make sure that they're safe and healthy and happy and capable of staying in their homes, especially through the process of making sure, if you can pay your taxes, that you do. And if you can't pay your taxes, then we find you the help to help you do that and give you the time you need to get that done. Homelessness and houselessness is a huge problem in the community, and you're absolutely right. It's something that the treasurer can work with to abate and to also help correct, and we are. I'm sure there's more that the county treasurer can do that I haven't come across yet, because again, 10 days in the job. So that's what I'm working on right now as it relates.
All right. Thank you, Tom. So we have a few more questions. I'm going to pause real quick here. All right. So our next question, it flows kind of direct through line from the houselessness issue, but it's also really critical, albeit it is also a very complex one. But another thing that comes up is gentrification, houselessness kind of goes hand in hand. For those of us, I used to live over on Cedar Street, and it was very like kind of boggling to just this is just a random example, but I lived on one end of the street where it was like $2,000 a month for like a 5-bedroom house. At the end of the street you have the these luxury apartments going up where it's like $900 for a studio. um, and there is a big concern that we're always popping up on these affordable places to live lists in these like big business magazines, and there's a concern that they're trying to kind of attract or draw in an upwardly mobile type that's going to kind of muscle in a lot of working class people from being able to afford places kind of near the downtown area. So I just want to ask, like, gentrification. One, is this a priority to you as treasurer, and how do you think you can use your position to kind of curtail some of the worst or bad outcomes of potential gentrification issues?
So this is one of my priorities. It's something that I talked about during the campaign quite a bit. Um, and it's a big thorny issue because you're right. We want to raise the average income in all parts of Kalamazoo, but especially those core neighborhoods, because that helps to raise the quality of living and quality of life. And that's great for everyone. How do we do that while maintaining the cultural makeup of those neighborhoods, or at the very least not pricing the people who live there out of their own homes? And it's a tough thing to do. um, I know that the process I talked about with the land bank, where we are doing the listening sessions with the community, taking input, working very hard to make sure that those spaces that we are putting back into the hands of the community are serving the community's needs. There is a very keen focus during those sessions and during those projects in general to make sure that we are not introducing an element of gentrification into those projects, so that when we use the very powerful tools that we have at our disposal, we're not doing more damage than we're doing good. Um, it's a very delicate thing. The other thing to do that the treasurer's office specifically can work with is that foreclosure abatement. Making sure that people understand the way the taxes work, the resources available to like simple simple things that most people know about, or at least think that are applied to their property, like the primary residence exemption. Okay, that's a massive tax break on your property taxes. And if you own your home and you live there and your name is on the title, you can get the PRE, what we call it, and all of a sudden you owe less in taxes. And that's super important for keeping people in their homes. But a lot of times in situations where a house is passed from a parent to a child, in some of these multi-generational homes, that isn't always applied for. If you quit claim, for example, a house from one person to another for $1, a title company isn't involved, and they're not going to suggest, because they're not there, they're not at the table, that, hey, we should apply for the PRE. Making sure people who come across our office have every exemption they can get, because I don't want you to pay more taxes than you have to. I don't want to pay more taxes than I have to. So I definitely don't want anybody to have to pay more than they have to on their property taxes. So we work really hard to make sure that people are only paying what they should and not what the system thinks they should. Um, finding those resources, getting them applied correctly, and then also working with our community partners and our local unit partners to maintain the level of tax so that even as the average income in the you know, the outlying parts of Kalamazoo and in the core of the city, because we are going to attract new people. Kalamazoo is a great place to live. I moved here in 2015, and pretty much immediately decided I was going to stay. I love it here. I'm from North Carolina. It doesn't snow there. And now I'm sick of the snow, but I'm still staying because it's cool to have 4 seasons. I love it here, and anybody who moves to Kalamazoo is going to love it here. So we're going to get new people, and we're going to keep them. And we need to make sure that need, because we want people to move here and like it and bring their businesses and bring their economic activity. But we also want to maintain the character of the city, because that's why people are moving here. The reason that you like it is because it's a diverse community, because downtown is just really cool, because you've got all of these different events and I bit my tongue. Ow. These different cultural spaces. That's why Kalamazoo is special. That's why we love it here, and we need to maintain it. Um, There are also resources that we have in the treasurer's office. And this is, again, it's not any of the specifically delineated powers, because how we invest our income or the money that the county has is super limited in its definition based on Public Act 20. We don't have a lot of freedom there. There's a lot of different things that we can't do, but we can talk to people and give them all the information that we can, and work with charities and community partners and groups for training and informational sessions, and also developers, and also people who are coming into the community. One thing that we want to focus on, or that I want to focus on, is the foreclosed property auctions and how we handle those. I haven't had an opportunity to work on those quite yet. We're still in the process. Hold on, I have a little one. Come here. Oh goodness. Okay. So we haven't had a chance to, I haven't had a chance to really dive into that yet, just because we're focused on making sure I have as few properties to auction off as possible. But once we do, I want to make sure that those properties are kept in the community, or at the very least that the development that's done helps to maintain the qualities of those communities instead of changing and gentrifying them. Gentrification happened in the town that I grew up in North Carolina. It happens everywhere in the world, and there are strategies for preventing it and for fighting it, and I intend to bend those to our use.
All right, thank you so much. That was a really detailed answer, Thomas. I really appreciate that. Gives me some hope for this issue.
And I also want to talk with you, and I want to talk with other community organizers, because if you have better ideas than I do, please let me hear them.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna careful what you wish for. I'm just gonna show up with oh, here's a lecture that I just wrote.
My door's always open.
To be serious, tell listeners this too. I did facilitate a teach-in about gentrification a couple years ago. A lot of local details in there too. So, next question, and this came to mind. So I'm also going to be interviewing some folks from Keep Kalamazoo Wild, and it got me related, kind of the issue of environmental preservation and how that intersects with land use and purchase. And those who don't know, Keep Kalamazoo Wild, they were behind the efforts to keep a section of the Pine Stock Preserve from being sold off to a private developer. So I was just curious, how you would use your position as treasurer and kind of the resources that are brought to bear to do that sort of environmental conservation, protecting lands in particular, but also just, other, ways to like kind of, protect, green spaces, using the powers either like in the land bank or as county treasurer.
I think that there is a lot of opportunity there, for properties that come into our hands through one method or another, that are adjacent to already existing, parks, green spaces, that sort of thing, to be able to expand those, um, if that's something that the local unit or the county that oversees those is interested in, which these days. There's a whole conversation going on in the kitchen. Sorry about that. The wonders of pandemic filming and whatnot. But it's important to me that those spaces are maintained. I was lucky enough to grow up sort of in a rural area, and to have the opportunity to run around in the woods and do things that my parents and grandparents probably wouldn't have approved of, because they probably should have killed me a couple of times. But those were huge growing opportunities, right? They were, learning how to climb a tree and how to fall out of one, learning how to go play in a river and catch fish. And you know we can really augment and enhance the lives of children. And I'm thinking about children because, well, girl dad, and my daughter was over here sitting in my lap for a few minutes. But I want to preserve and maintain those green spaces as much as we can for her and for the kids that are going to be taking this over from us once we're no longer here. Preserving those spaces, making sure that they're taken care of is super important. um, and as far as the treasurer's office can be involved in that with, right of first refusal is something that local units can place on properties that are going through the foreclosure process, so that they foreclose, and then instead of going to auction, the local units can buy them for their own use. Um, I want to be active in that process and making sure they know that those units are available, and that you know, that is a good option, to take them and expand those green spaces or create new ones, to you know, encourage the creation of those parks, to encourage the continuation of them. And as far as my voice will go, because in this, as far as what the county does with its assets, I have exactly as much power as any of the other 260,000 Kalamazoo County residents, except that I can be very loud when I want to be. And the office of the treasurer doesn't give me any special powers there, but maybe it makes my voice a little bit louder. And so I'm a bit of an environmentalist at heart, and intend to use my voice and any volume added to it through winning an election, um, to advocate for that very strongly.
All right. Our next question, it's interesting you brought up, rural background, um, in North Carolina. Something I think a lot of our show is usually hyper focused on city, county level, and
Mhm.
I think there's not enough attention necessarily gets paid to kind of like the overall economy of Kalamazoo County and how it interacts with itself. Um, this question is focused particular on poverty, but also acknowledging that there needs to be kind of a holistic solution that urban and rural poverty, and small town poverty, they have similar roots, but they function differently. One maybe a soundtrack by the Roots, and the other by Bruce Springsteen. Two of my favorite bands from high school. Anyway, uh, uh, but yeah, so I was just kind of curious, about how you're going to tackle just, issues of poverty and income inequality overall, but also how you view those approaches, whether you're talking about like the urban core of Kalamazoo, some of these kind of small satellite towns like Parchment, Comstock, and again, there's a large rural areas in our district with people who maybe they own land, but they're just finding it harder and harder to cling to it every year. So I know that's a very big question, very
Yeah.
broad, but I was more like, I'm just kind of curious, get inside your head a little bit, like how you've been thinking about these questions and how it's going to be relevant to your role as treasurer.
So I've had a lot of, or a couple of interesting conversations, and I'm going to start with the out county pieces, and we can talk about the city after that. But if, just because you're right, the core of Kalamazoo, those core neighborhoods get a lot of attention, and they get a lot of investment, and they get a lot of focus, both media and government and philanthropy and other types of focus. And the out county sometimes can feel like it's fallen out of the wayside. And we've seen some of the effects of that on a larger scale through the 2016 election. Oh dear. Through the 2016 election and the rise of conservatism in those more rural areas, the cementing of it. And it's important that we remember that poverty, to be informal, poverty sucks no matter where you are. And so I've had a couple of really interesting conversations, specifically about one township, one area that they want to add a coffee shop because it will give a place for the community to come together. It generates economic activity. It gives working spaces, co-working spaces where ideas and people, and you can have a lot of interaction and a lot of economic activity in a coffee shop, right? It's a small thing, but the transformer that but that leads to another problem. It's like, okay, well, do we have the water resources to do that with the sewer and the fresh water? Do we have the power resources? And it turns out when you look at that, you go, no, because the transformer substation that supplies the whole area only has enough power for maybe 2 or 3 more homes. Okay, well, who runs that and how do we get them to invest? Well, that's consumers. And now we have to have that conversation with consumers' energy. And I don't know if you've ever had to try to have a conversation with consumers' energy about spending money. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So now we're in a whole, dealing with utilities and dealing with a lack of resources and an inequality of not just monetary resources, but literal electricity and water and ground and traffic. Once you build the coffee shop, that's going to increase traffic to your downtown. Do you have the road capacity to handle that? Do you have a stoplight? Do you have the parking needed? So, it's a very big issue. It's a very complex issue, but it's one that's worth tackling. And like I said, I'm having these conversations because it is worth tackling. It's going to take a lot of work, but building that coffee shop, building that extra housing, bringing people in, lights, like it's the spark. It's the spark that can start to build the fire of economic activity, and economic activity can generate increased feelings of purpose and meaning for people that live in an area. It can bring new people to the area, to keep young people from fleeing an area. We see that a lot in rural communities, that the kids use the high schools, grow up, and then move to downtown Kalamazoo or Grand Rapids or Chicago or California, other place, because there's no opportunity for them. And so who better to have a conversation with consumers' energy than a government official that says, hey, we need this. Well, why do we need to spend that money? Because that's going to make you money in the end. Because if you build the substation, all of a sudden we have the power resources and we can build more houses for you to sell electricity to. But building those houses to sell more electricity to also requires that the construction market be a little bit more reasonable. And you see where we get into the endless cycle of trying to solve all of the problems of the world at the same time. But that's what I got elected to do. So here we go. And we'll work on that. And a lot of those same issues or issues that are very similar apply in the core neighborhoods of Kalamazoo. But instead of talking about the lack of availability of electricity or clean water, because we have that mostly in Kalamazoo, we're talking about food insecurity. I'm talking about food deserts and the lack of available access to, high quality grocery stores. We're talking about the lack of access to public transportation. We're talking about the lack of access to community resources or education or employment opportunities. So the problem at its core is a lack of equitable distribution of resources. It's just that those resources change, and who we have to talk to and who we have to deal with in order to facilitate the equitable distribution of those resources is, part of the issue.
Yep, that's very, very true, Thomas. All right, so we're at our last question one. I want to thank you so much for taking a good chunk of time out of your day to really go into the nuts and bolts of a lot of these issues. I think it's really not often enough we get people get a chance to engage with their local elected officials. In such a in-depth manner. That's one of the things we really love to do on the show. So this last one is more open-ended. It's really just kind of like, whatever we didn't really get to in this interview, but it is framed around a really important question. You are the new treasurer. We haven't had a new treasurer in quite some time. What are some of your top priorities for reform for the Kalamazoo County Treasurer's Office, and just some of your priorities in general?
So the one thing that I want to focus on most is that equitable distribution of resources and making sure that we maintain housing and keeping people in their houses. Because if you have a roof over your head, then other things are a lot easier. So, getting us to zero homeowner occupied foreclosures across the entire county is something that I'm looking to expand. And then making sure that those properties that we take possession of are used to better the communities that we serve. And really, those are the two things that I'm focused on right now.
All right, Thomas, again, thank you so much.
And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead, finish your thought.
I have to go. I've got another appointment, but thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right, thank you very much. And, best of luck to you. We're all pulling for you. You've got a very complicated situation. Not to scare you. I think like one of our post-election episodes is like, oh man, we just sent Ned Stark to King's Landing. But no, I don't think
okay.
you'll incur the same fate, but we're really happy to see you in there, Thomas. So
I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
all right. Have yourself a fantastic evening.
Thank you. Bye.